Welcome to Caucus Connections, a podcast with the Kentucky House Majority Caucus.
Welcome to Caucus Connections. I'm your host, John Alexander. In this episode of Caucus Connections, we'll be talking to two co-chairs of statutory committees. These are committees that meet year-round to analyze and discuss matters and issues pertaining to the Commonwealth. And just like the interim joint committees we've been discussing these past few episodes, COVID-19 is a topic that will keep coming up in the weeks and months to come. First up, Representative Myron Dossett of the 9th District will be talking about his work with the Tobacco Settlement Agreement Fund Oversight Committee. We are here with Representative Myron Dossett of the 9th District, representing parts of Christian and Hopkins counties, co-chair of the Tobacco Settlement Agreement Fund Oversight Committee. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing fine. I hope everyone out across the state are doing well also.
I've talked about this with several other members. That's an odd question to ask people these days, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And we're all experiencing it. I have a little one at home, and I think it's harder on our children how their lives have been impacted. As an adult, we can kind of go with this, but have an 8-year-old at the house who's wanting to go to Disney World, and it's hard to explain to her, and she blames a lot of. I think she's listening to me, and she places any time whenever something comes up about COVID, she throws a fit, and I want COVID to go away. So it's difficult on them.
Even with a child's perspective, though, that's kind of what we all want, though, isn't it?
For
it to go away,
that's what we all want.
Get back to some sense of normalcy, maybe.
Absolutely.
Of course, in this week's episode of Caucus Connections, I'm talking to you and then Representative Bechler about your statutory committees. How do statutory committees differ from, say, our regular interim joint committee meetings?
Well, of course, the statutory committees will run throughout the entire year, and that committee was put together by legislation. And that's the purpose behind it. And of course, me serving on the Tobacco Settlement Oversight Committee, that stems from the master settlement dealing with tobacco, which happened in 1998 there in Washington, D.C. Due to the lawsuit, the attorney generals from states across the United States filed against the tobacco companies. And with that settlement, money came into individual states, and then it's used for different purposes.
How much since 1998, which is just a ballpark figure, would you say has come into the state?
Since 1998, there's been $2.5 billion that have come into the state of Kentucky from the tobacco companies. And one of the things that Kentucky did wisely is that we have set aside 50% of that money, and that 50% goes toward agriculture or things that would expand the economy, the agricultural economy. The other 50% is used toward Medicaid and rural water, things across the state. So we've divided that money in half, and to make sure we don't spend it all in one place.
Is it the same amount every year, or does it depreciate every year?
No, it depreciates every year, and the amount will continue to drop. It's also based upon tobacco sales, cigarette sales. So as people stop smoking, then the amount does come down. We don't want to become dependent, because as so much other money that comes in, we don't know for sure what that will be year over year. So we be careful not to become overly dependent on the revenue that does come in from that.
There's a certain irony to that, in that the reason we got the money to begin with was because of smokers, part of it, and then the amount of money depends on smokers, but we also want that. We also want that cessation too. We also we want smokers to stop smoking.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, I have to look at things dealing with tobacco from two different points of view. I'm from a heavy agricultural area.
Yes.
I represent part of Christian and Hopkins County. In Christian County, tobacco, both dark and burley tobacco, generate nearly $50 million every year into the economy. That's money that our farmers and individuals working in agriculture used to provide for their families, send their children to college, and which is one of the really great things about setting part of this money to diversify away from tobacco. And a lot of that money has been used for that purpose, whether it be toward livestock or greenhouses and different things that the money has gone back into agriculture and has diversified our farmers.
Are there any projects that fall outside of your committee that still use these funds, or is everything that uses these funds goes through your committee, correct?
That would be on the 50%. Now, of course, when you look
beyond that
right there, that other part that goes into the general fund, and as I said, is used toward Medicaid, healthcare, different things along that, early childhood education, or for daycare. Part of those dollars go toward that right there. That's that other half of the funds that come into the state.
Something you said in today's meeting that I took to heart and I really appreciated was you talked about agriculture, and you talked about the committee. You were talking about the Cattlemen's Association. You said the goal is to fix things. And that kind of, that certainly goes with the committee to begin with, doesn't it? Is that to keep looking at how these dollars are spent.
Well, and it's agriculture as a whole. When you look at our farmers and people involved in agriculture, whatever type of business, so many times things happen on the fly, and things will break down. I grew up with an ag background, worked in farm supplies after I got out of school. You have to go when the time is right, when the weather's right. And a lot of days you're working 16, 18-hour days because there's no other option. But when things break, you fix them. And that's one of the things I've always said about agriculture. And we were discussing the cattle and the issues that dealt with as we saw the price of beef in our groceries increase over the spring. And I know I had a conversation with a gentleman who owns one of the facilities in Christian County, a meat processor. And at the beginning of March, at the end of March, he told me what was coming because of him being in the business, and he knew what the feed were happening in the feedlots where the cattle were coming from. It was one of the things that we were discussing today, looking at the future to make sure that we fix this. One of the things that is becoming a really keen topic here in Kentucky is the fact of getting more beef processors, meat processors themselves here in the state, because a lot of times the cattle are slaughtered outside of the state, and then hogs, whatever livestock, and then they're shipped in. Well, if you diversify out and you have more locations, then there's a less chance of something being shut down due to, as we've experienced with COVID being in those processors, with people that would test positive, that would shut down that facility for 2 or 3 days. And if you're more diversified out and you have other locations here in the state that can do that same job, not only does it benefit the supply, but it also benefits the producer, because our farmers will have more places they can send their livestock to be processed, and will have a better price for what they're making on the farm as well.
It gives you more options, doesn't it?
More options, absolutely.
And when we talk about that statement you said today, the goal is to fix things, we can really look at the legislative process in the same way, can't we? And that's why you and your colleagues are here, is that when things come up that need to be addressed, you can address them. There's a constant process of kind of fixing things or looking at things.
Try not to break things.
And
actually, because things are going to break on their own. So it's not for us to break them. Things happen that we experience every day. We're experiencing right now with individuals that have applied for unemployment insurance and not being able to get their benefits. I'm still getting individuals to this day. Today I had 2 emails come through of people that had filed back in March that still had not received their benefits, and that is sad. I know here over the last few weeks we did the pop-up. The governor started to pop up unemployment insurance claims across the state. I wish he'd have done that a month ago. As a business owner, I'm always figuring what the worst case scenario is going to be from day to day, and I'm always trying to prepare. Yes, you didn't see this, but once it pops up, you've got to move on it. You can't sit and have a young couple that has 2 children expecting and that are needing these benefits, and telling them, I'm sorry, we can't get it to you because we're just too overwhelmed. No, you fix it. You don't make an excuse, you fix it. So, like I said, that's our goal. That's the goal, not only me serving in Frankfort, it's my goal at home, within my business, within personal life. When things break at home, they get fixed, and
right then when they need fixing.
Right when they need fixing, and sometimes my wife will ask me, "Wouldn't it be easier for you to have someone come in and fix something?" And I will say, "But that's the go. That's one of those feelings you get inside. Yes, at some point, but I like trying to fix it myself to begin with."
And I think that's maybe even the process as human beings. We're
Yes.
never really finished, are we? As
Yes.
far as development and our
It's an
lives
achievement,
in general.
and we instill it with the little one there at the house. It's something she gets instilled because I always tell her everything's fixable, and I'll watch her when something breaks, and she takes after me, and I can fix that.
And that's something that's interesting. That's come up as well. Is you're right. Everything is fixable if you seek the help.
If you seek the help.
And I think that might be one of the things that maybe the Beshear administration has fallen short on, is they've not consulted the legislature. They have not consulted the General Assembly as far as trying to fix some of these problems that have arisen.
Serving in politics, I have learned you're only as good as the individuals you're willing to reach out to and ask for help. I am good on certain aspects that I deal with on an everyday basis, but when it comes to things involving health, I need to reach out to physicians, doctors, and I'm very fortunate I have people that I can reach out to. If it's legal I have attorneys that are friends of mine that I can actually reach out to. When it's things in farming, something that I've in a point that goes a little beyond my expertise, I have friends that I reach out to. So I'm only as good as the people I'm willing to listen to. And I listen to my wife because there are things that go beyond me at home. And she is the boss, I guarantee it.
I was about to say, she's probably the last word, isn't she?
You better believe it. Absolutely.
Let's talk about the meeting today. Warren Bechler, he's really the star of some of these meetings, isn't he?
Fantastic. Not a brighter individual could you have dealing with agriculture. They're handling the governor's ag policy.
Talk to me a little bit about what he does. He comes in and tells you the projects that he's overseeing with these funds, correct?
Well, of course, you have the Ag Development Board here within Frankfort that has appointees from the governors that the governor will make. Also with the Commissioner of Ag serves on that as well. Proposals are made by different counties, different entities, for benefit for these dollars. And also there at the local level, there is an ag development committee there at the individual tobacco counties. So you work up the ladder right there, and that way we have multiple eyes looking at some of these proposals. Farmers markets come from using this money right here. Rural water out within our counties, looking at ways to conserve energy on the farm and conserve water. These are all projects that at some point in time come towards the Ag Development Committee and then comes towards us for us to look at also to know where those dollars are being spent and making sure they're being spent wisely.
Talk to me also about the Cattlemen's Association, the presentation they made today.
Cattlemen's Association came in and they have done a great job really trying to look at things that will increase the benefit toward our cattle producers here across the state. Kentucky is the top cattle producing state east of the Mississippi, and a lot of people don't realize how important cattle are here. And whenever we look at that, also in Christian County, I see cattle, we see chickens, all this different thing, and how diverse this state really is and how it impacts everyday life. But of course, the Cattlemen's Association, they are working to diversify out across the state to look at those individuals, the companies that could come in, processors for livestock. They have done a really good job working to benefit cattle growers across this entire Commonwealth.
We're going to be obviously seen the effects of COVID-19 for a very long time, for many years to come, as far as the impact on the economy, on agriculture, really across the board. Are you going to be looking at that in your upcoming meetings, the effect that it's had on the agriculture? I mean, we really have no choice but to look at those things.
We have to look at it, agriculture, but across the board as well. Whenever you know that you see revenue off, I will not be surprised by we lost over $1 billion between the end of March and the end of June. We are seeing people go back to work, but we're also seeing them work. A lot of the industries at home in Christian County are working at 50% capacity. Revenue is going to be short. I wouldn't be surprised for us to be short $2 billion again in the upcoming budget. And where do we make those dollars up? Because it will have an impact when we're looking at the pension system, we're looking at health care, we're looking at education across the board. But there is bright spots that can come from this. I think it's time for us to look at reforming the tax code here in Kentucky. Moving away from the income tax and moving more toward a consumption tax. Where I'm located on the border with Tennessee, Tennessee never shut down in the way that we did here in Kentucky over the spring. And they are back booming. And so we look at the state, and we also have to look at local governments because they've been impacted as well. And maybe allowing them the ability to have a sales tax option and move away from payroll tax that some of our cities are having to use. So when bad situations occur, there are opportunities and things for us to look to make ourselves better in the future. So that'll be the go.
Now thanks in part on a national, the economy being in such good shape on a national level, and then our pro-business and pro-family policies that the majority has put into place these past few years. Do you think that helped us going into this crisis a little bit more maybe than other areas? It
was a major benefit because we were sitting at low unemployment rates. We were really, we saw revenue increasing, but as I said, as you start making decisions based upon this virus that has gotten started, how it's impacted our businesses, things that we can't do in the future. I don't see how we can shut business down across the state of Kentucky, across our entire nation again. I've always said, I look at myself personally, my age. I am 59 years old. My time on earth is a whole lot shorter than my granddaughter, who is 8 years old. I don't want to do things that will devastate her future economically and put a fiscal burden upon our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren that will be unbearable. We can't do that. Once again, we come back to that old adage of fixing things. Let's look at a way to fix this. Move forward. We've got to be cautious of what we do right here and not burden our young people with, as I said, with something that will be unbearable, or we could lose our entire nation. The foundations that the United States was created upon. And that's the most important thing for us to be careful about, because my granddaughter, I want her to live in a country that's free. I don't want her living in a country that moves to something that's socialist or, heaven forbid, would become communist, as we see with Russia or China. We are the shining light. So we can fix what problems are in front of us.
It's the old adage, we can't borrow our way into prosperity.
Never. It doesn't work. You can look at it at the personal level all the way up to government. It doesn't work.
Thank you so much, Representative Myron Dossett, for sitting with us here today on Caucus Connections.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And now Representative Lynn Bechler of the 4th District will be talking about the July meeting of the Program Review and Investigations Committee. I am here with Representative Lynn Bechler of the 4th District. What counties does that cover, sir?
That covers all of my home county of Crittenden, as well as Livingston County, Caldwell County, and a portion of Christian County.
We want to talk a little bit, just generally. You co-chair the Program Review and Investigations Committee.
Right.
It's It's a statutory committee which meets throughout the year, not just during session or just during the interim, but all year long.
Correct.
What is your committee responsible for?
The Program Review and Investigations Committee is actually a 16-member bipartisan committee, and it is made up of 8 of the 16. There are 8 senators and 8 representatives. The committee itself is empowered to review the operations of state agencies and programs, to determine whether funds are being spent for the purposes for which they were appropriated, to evaluate the efficiency of program operations, and to evaluate the impact of state government organizations. It's interesting to note that state agencies are obligated to correct operational problems identified by the committee, and they must implement the committee's recommendations or propose suitable alternatives. I don't know of any other committee that has been charged with that particular responsibility.
Representative Dossett had a good point in the previous interview we just did, and he was talking about his committee. He was talking about really the legislature in general. And he said one of the things he said in his meeting today was the goal is to fix things. And that's really part of what this committee does, isn't it? To look at things and fix things as we're going.
You're exactly right. We have to look at the things. Today's meeting, for example, was with members of the Education and Workforce Investment Cabinet as well as the Labor Cabinet. We were trying to delve into issues surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic that's been affecting not only our state but our country and the world, as a matter of fact.
First off, we'll start off with Josh Benton with the Education and Workforce Development Cabinet. Did he help you see what part of the problem has been with unemployment insurance, or are there still plenty of questions out there, especially when he talked about the data breaches and things like that?
I think Josh helped. I think all the hearings actually help in some fashion or another. But to your specific question, are there more questions out there? Absolutely. With regard to the data breach, testimony today indicated that the Office of the Inspector General was looking into it, and the hope was that there would be a report in the near future. I think the report was people were actually hoping it would be out next week. And in that report, it's supposed to take a look at, I believe, not only why the data breach occurred, but what were the impediments, or why was the breach not reported immediately like it's supposed to under statute. An interesting thing is that the report was made after the Attorney General and the auditor came to the agency and indicated that those folks had heard reports about the breach. And to Amy Cubbage's credit, she admitted, she's the general counsel in the Labor Department, and she indicated that it was a legal problem. It came out of the legal department. So hopefully we'll find out more when the OIG report is finally released.
Talk to me about the Labor Cabinet. We're transitioning from where it was previously to now, where the Unemployment Office was originally, to now the Labor Cabinet. Is that transition going well, or do you feel that it's necessary?
It is probably a good thing. It was brought up in testimony today that most states and the federal government have their unemployment through the Labor Cabinet. The issue is that the change was made during this pandemic, and not just pandemic, but with the rise of unemployment claims. And so that kind of takes away some of the transparency that legislators otherwise would have had into determining where to go for assistance from their constituents. We're still getting notification from our constituents of claims that have been filed as far back as March that still have not been resolved. Cabinet is working on it, and hopefully we're going to come to conclusion on that very shortly.
Kind of put it in Western terms, it's kind of a bad time to switch horses, wasn't it?
It really is. It really is. What is it? You don't switch horses midstream. I think this was more a river than a stream.
Yeah.
So I don't think it looks good. I think it actually shows. It tends to put the Education and Workforce Investment Cabinet in a bad light to change right in the middle. I'm not taking a position on whether or not it should have started out in the Labor Department. I know that testimony indicated that discussion had been going on almost from the beginning of the governor's term in office, and it just so happened that they made it after the data breach, which once again doesn't look good.
It looks more reactionary than anything.
Absolutely.
And going back to that as well, do you feel it's fair to, and something I noticed in today's meeting, it seemed like this was happening, maybe I read it wrong, but do you feel it's fair to pass the buck and blame to previous administrations and legislatures for the problems we're going through now with unemployment insurance? Is that a fair argument for them to make?
I don't think it does anybody good to blame somebody else for what's going on. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging that this is where things were when we began to see the problem when we took over, but to blame somebody else, I never think is a good way to go. I think that it is always better to just acknowledge where we are, where we were when we began, and what we're trying to do.
There was a reason why the offices were set up that way, wasn't there? I mean, really with the pro-business and pro-family policies of the legislature and the economy doing as well as it was, there wasn't that need for as many offices, was there, at the time?
Exactly. The change did take place, or start to take place, back when unemployment was at historic lows, actually. And the money that had been set aside for the unemployment insurance folks was there. The fund was whole, and nobody foresaw the pandemic coming on. I have great sympathy for the folks who are trying to handle the task they've been given. But what I say about myself is that I can't complain about problems in the legislature because I made the choice to run and run again. So in my mind, to push blame on somebody else when you decided that you wanted to get into government business, be the governor, work on the governor's team, etc., you have no complaints.
Do you think the legislature should have been consulted in the very beginning of all this? Certainly more than it has been.
Oh, I think so. I'm not a big proponent of huge committees to try and come up with an answer. Things get kicked down the road that way. But we do have equal branches of government, and one of those is the legislative branch. And to begin having all the decisions made unilaterally by the executive branch, I think is a mistake. Specifically to your question, yes. I believe that the legislature should have been consulted more. Maybe I should say should have been consulted and leave it at that. Right. Not more, just consulted, period, prior to making a lot of these decisions.
There's a wealth of knowledge in the legislature, isn't there? From a constituent point of view, the different amount of constituents that you folks talk to on a daily basis.
Oh, absolutely.
And the knowledge that each of you brings to the table as well as a legislator.
Right. As a legislator, we have a lot of different backgrounds. But, I represent a very rural area as opposed to a legislator who hails from, let's say, Louisville or Northern Kentucky. When I run a campaign, I have to go across 4 counties, as I mentioned before. And that's pretty much driving all along. A legislator in, let's say, Louisville can walk her or his district in the same amount of time that it takes me probably to go from one end of the district to the other without stopping. So it's a big difference in constituency, and I'm not a believer in one size fits all. I think that what would work in my district would not necessarily work in the district of the Speaker or the President of the Senate.
I've asked this of some of our other committee co-chairs that I've been talking to along the way. The COVID-19 response and what we're dealing with, the aftermath of all of that, will that be a lot of what Program Review is going to be dealing with here probably in the year to come and in the years to come, really?
I don't know about years to come, but I think in the near future there's going to be an awful lot taking a look at the COVID-19 issue. response, what was done, could things have been done better, and that's without pointing fingers. That's just trying to say where did we as a Commonwealth do a good job, and where did we as a Commonwealth not do as good a job, and how can we fix it? That said, I think we're still going to be in program review investigating some other things. I know that before this COVID-19 issue came to bear, we were spending a fair amount of time on the Kentucky Wired issue, and that's another one that we're just, to use my highly technical term, tons of money were being spent on broadband, and I think we need to get to the bottom of that as well.
Thank you so much, Representative Lynn Bechler of the 4th District, talking with us today on Caucus Connections.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You've been listening to Caucus Connections. Tune in next week for another episode from the House Majority Caucus.